Hello and welcome to Tapas and Pretzels, the adorsys podcast. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Tapas and Pretzels podcast. My name is Inga and I'm your moderator. And we have also our experts here, Tim and David, and we have also a guest. So welcome, Michael Schank. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. No problem. I think we will, talk a lot about what you're doing and what your main topics are. But first of all, I will introduce you. So you are, or Michael, is one of the top voices on LinkedIn and the founder of Process Inventory Advisors. He has also 25 years of experience in the field of financial services industry. And what you also have published recently is a book that it's called Digital Transformation Success. So really, really cool topic, I guess. And I think we will also talk a little bit about the topics of the book. And what I've read was that transformations fail at a staggering rate of 70%. So can you tell me, Michael, why is that, and what can you recommend or that the 70% will become less?
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me on. The whole thesis of my book is that organizations are just extremely complex. If you think about the people, process, technology environment, third-party vendors they use, risk and compliance, you name it. And they evolve over time, not necessarily with intentionality, but this evolution of an organization really leads to no one understanding everything that the organization does in detail. So when you do something as ambitious as a transformation, which is a multi-year, multi-million dollars or tens of or hundreds of $1,000,000 program, keeping people aligned to what you have to do to change the organization becomes a challenge. So really my book and really speaks to a process-based framework, which is a very simple concept. Inventory every process that your organization has, and that becomes a common language or a common semantic structure for being very precise in this is what I have to change and who's responsible for driving that change. It's a big gap in the process management kind of literature and conventional thinking. So that's why I wrote the book, just to see people that there's a better way to drive transformations through clarity.
Super interesting, especially when you say like inventory of the whole processes to build a semantic model within the company. This is actually really interesting for me, because what we also try to do usually is we try to advise companies in the way how to build semantic layers and semantic models as an enterprise context. But usually we start from asking questions about the business without tackling too much in the process. So what was the experience that led you or got you to the knowledge or the wisdom of writing this book? What was the accident, the observation you made to start? Let's focus on the process.
Yeah, so I was a lifelong consultant. So I've been in the consulting industry in financial services, as Inga mentioned, for over 25 years. I started as a technologist, so as a Java C++ programmer, solution architect, led large system integration programs. That was at Accenture. I was there for 13 years. I moved on to Bank of America in a technical role. But one of the things I knew nothing about what the business did. So my focus was, is the code delivered on time? Is it defect free? That's all I really, and technical aspects of it. I moved over to EY and I spent 10 years there. But one of my first projects was just a large bank in the US is like, create a business capability model for our bank. And we interviewed a few people and we laid out something a couple levels deep, but it was an epiphany moment. I was like, wow, I get to see what the business did. I'm like, this just seems so powerful. So I dedicated myself to doing that. And in my consulting at EY, I span the range of topics within transformations, from defining strategy, designing IT architecture, doing risk and compliance, running transformation programs, you name it. And I kept seeing patterns of just this confusion and chaos in organizations, and people not being aligned on what really needs to happen. So that's where I developed the framework, and I realized that business capabilities don't go deep enough, that you really need to understand what the business does. So that's where I developed the framework. I left EY, then I was head of process excellence for Citi for 2 years, where I was doing this at scale. And I'm just a big believer that this is the solution, that ultimately the semantic layer has to be anchored in what the business does. And I think the business and process professionals need to play their part in doing that.
And how you define that transition, because I think that currently there is no semantic information, not too much extended in the business world. How you which recommendations you will provide to our audience to make that transition to a more semantic oriented model?
Yeah, so I'll first talk about how you do it. So you need to talk to the business. I think there's obviously AI that could scan documents and whatnot, but ultimately you've got to talk to the business to resolve any discrepancies or overlaps or missing stuff. So what I do is always do my homework with it. So ingest any information I can, so I could go into a session not with a blank sheet of paper, but with something. But I do a hierarchical interview process where I start at the line of business and say, just describe what your organization does. And they'll say, we do A, B, C, and D, and they'll tell me the leaders for those. Then I'll have interviews at that level, and I'll keep walking down the organizational hierarchy until I get down to the processes. But that gives me a complete and accurate view. And then I do formal attestations going back up. So do you believe this is accurate and complete? And I capture that in some electronic format. But then once I take it to the leader, now I'm pretty assured that everything's covered and that people can trust it, that they could use it as that semantic structure. If you're going to, second part of your question, if you're going to do this, you need to commit to building some sort of process capability, whether you call it process center of excellence or whatever you call it. But you need a group of people that do the modeling of the business, from the process inventory to integrating business capabilities, value streams, process models, whatever it may be. And then you have to govern it, because organizations change all the time. So you have to have some processes to periodically revisit it or adjust the changes in the environment. There's also one other important aspect to that, which is data integration. So organizations have data that describe how their environment works, all in disparate and unconnected repositories. So you have maybe a CMDB for your applications, you have vendor catalogs, you have product catalogs, you have risk and GRC risk and control repositories, you name it. Now you could take that data and align it to what process uses those resources or has that information. Now you're really building a full kind of repository of all operational intelligence to drive everything transformation.
So, okay, because I have also the experience once where I had to model like a semantic model for a company or a business department, and what we've recognized if the process is not good, then the process digital is also not good. So do you also have the experience that if you want to model like in a semantic way, there is also a lot of missing information or like bad processes? So you will recognize bad processes better than before. Would you agree with me?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was having this discussion with a friend, and he's like, well, you should fix the processes before you document them. I'm like, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, because if you don't document them, you don't know where the broken processes are. So if you do this, and I write about my book, like Lean Six Sigma and the whole DMAIC process. And in my experience, that's typically people looking at one or a small subset of processes, looking for inefficiencies and how you could fix them. But if you do this, now I could look at the organization from a 30,000 foot view level and see where there's different organizational units doing the same process and using the same technology and say, why are we doing that? Let's just streamline the organization from a top-down perspective. And then we could also look at broken processes and take a step back and say, why are you doing it that way? But the key is everything's interconnected. It's not only what business people are doing, it's how technology serves. It's really the whole environment. And that's where capturing this thing holistically is so important.
Which is quite interesting. One thing where I want to pinch your brain is, you said you discovered basically that the process is an important puzzle piece while creating a capability map for a company. But one thing I have learned while doing enterprise architecture management is basically, well, start looking at the capabilities first because they are quite stable, while processes and applications are changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go now so far as like, hey, let's start with the processes first, and you can derive the capabilities, the important capabilities first, or would you still say look on the capabilities first?
I would focus on process first. So my big challenge with business capabilities is they're defined intentionally as organizationally agnostic. So when I was at Citi, for instance, you could have a business capability that says account management. Well, you can open an account in the retail bank, you can open a mortgage account, you can open a credit card account. So you got the same capability in multiple areas. But unless you do that mapping, you don't know that, right? And if you're going to say, oh, let's standardize how these processes work in terms of business logic, or let's consolidate them or create a shared service or outsource or whatever you're going to do, you're going to need those specific locations. So what I do is I'll do the process inventory, and then every process is mapped directly to a capability. And that gives me the ability, and I always talk about it's the dictionary versus the thesaurus. So I get to see exactly what each line of business does, but I also get to see the like processes in different organizational units.
Super interesting.
And what about governance? Because before in the introduction we was talking about that. Which are your recommendations for governance? But aligning processes not only in API space but also in AI. No, I think that now we are at some sense coming back to the old days where IT governance was a whole, and now then we split it in between data governance and AI governance and architecture governance and whatever governance.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are coming back to managing everything from a single point of view, but in a different way. How do you think we can do that?
So from a technology governance perspective, and I'll throw out my hypothesis here is, and I came from technology. I think enterprise architecture groups struggle because they don't really have an understanding of what the business does. And there's always there's friction between the business and tech, where business wants their solutions now, and tech's like, well, slow down. That doesn't align to my standards. So, but if you could arm enterprise architects with here's in detail what the business does and how it aligns to capabilities, et cetera, I really think that you could define an IT strategy that more aligns to what the business is looking for. Define kind of key technology capabilities that you want to share, and you don't want some other group purchasing a platform and building a redundancy in your technology. It could help you find shadow IT and really get that into the fold. So I think it's really an enabler for technology governance. And really the whole theme of this is that this is the common thread that not only aligns business with IT, but with data, with risk and compliance, with third-party vendor management, like you name it. It's the common thread that ties everything together through a common view of what the business does.
And what about people? Which is the role people has in that? I mean, for example, AI is people is scared about AI. How are you dealing with that emotions?
So I think it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. Obviously, it's scary for people because AI will displace jobs. I mean, I think we would all agree with that. But I think doing something like this gives people more accountability for what they own, because when I do a process inventory, not only do I name the process, but I name who owns it, and who owns it from not only changing it and improving it, but also just operating on a day-to-day basis. And there's a concept that I wrote about in the book called democratized innovation, which is previous models have viewed innovation as coming top down or from a centralized innovation or R&D team. But with the democratized innovation, it's really viewing and understanding that everybody has expertise in what they do. If you could tap into that, So you've got to create a culture where it's okay to try new ideas. It's understanding not everything's going to work, but through that you're going to get nuggets of really good ideas that change the environment. But you also have to arm people with information about how the organization works. So end to end, how processes connect end to end, what resources they use, really a full rich set of information. And if you do that, then now I think you could elevate people from just, doing their day-to-day jobs, but also being an engine for innovation.
Which brings me to my next question is basically, we all know AI stands and falls with the data. Well, that's a good thing, but that's only 50% of the whole thing. I think what AI really needs is semantics to run the processes, as you say.
Yep.
What is your recommendation? Because I see if you start from the processes, you also get a better feeling about like what data can I feed to my agent, because in the end, process will be more or less triggered in the future by agents, but also like the data governance of security. Like, is that an information that can be seen by any agent in the organization, and what is the consequences and the following processes? Are they allowed to see that information? Have you also made your thoughts around this?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think this is, data is a great launching off point, and you need a semantic structure. So you need a common language for describing what you do. And I think this is, I read a, Deloitte had a state of AI report where they asked business leaders, where do you want to see AI go next? And a plurality of respondents said they want to deeply embed AI into their processes and functions. And I just don't think that's possible unless you know what those are. So that goes to digital twin of an organization. So you guys have probably heard of digital twin, which is a virtual model of your real world environment. It's been big in manufacturing and physical components because those are easy to model. But coming from financial services and banking, there's nothing physical about it because people could be located anywhere around the world. So how do you create that model of the environment? You do it by having your processes and model everything out. Well, every process leaves a digital footprint. So if you could create this model, use it to train AI on what your business does, and then you could collect that digital footprint. Now AI can do and digital twins could do predictive analytics and simulations and data-driven decision making, et cetera. But it also I think enables AI agents too, because and I always talk about the example of, and this is maybe a little bit futuristic, where I just say a voice prompt in my phone saying, hey, I want to add some functionality to this site. And in a multi-agent environment, there's an agent who's kind of understanding the request, but it passes off to another agent to understand the impacts. And it goes into this repository of all your business information and all the data and says, here's what processes exist. Here's what processes are needed. Here's the platforms that serve them. Sends it to another agent that goes into the source code repository, generates the new code, gives it to another agent that throws it in the CI/CD pipeline to do all your deployment, your testing, does all your documentation requirements, et cetera, procedures. And then now you are testing the new site. So changing that development cycle from a matter of months or weeks to almost instantaneous. In terms of security, obviously in a multi-agent environment, you could define what agents have access to what information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it also best practice that you, like, while inventorying like all the processes, collecting all the processes, like, do you also collect information about, well, more governance related attributes?
For sure. Like, I'll inventory a governance organization and understand their processes. And that insight and transparency could really, really help them shape their processes better. But I also think it's a big enabler for all governance, because you're just providing more information about how the business works so that they could drive better decisions in their governance processes.
And in which areas you will apply, or will you will recommend automation, and which is the impact you can expect from automating those processes or workflows or whatever?
Yeah, I have a friend who works in a automation company, and they do a lot of RPA. And he told me RPA is becoming very commoditized. Everyone does it. It's it's not the differentiator that a firm like that wants to bring. And then so he said that the real differentiator is process discovery, because a lot of organizations to do automation will have like some list out there that people could say, here's my idea for automation, let's do this. But if you really zoom out a little bit, are those really the most impactful processes? Is that really the most ROI for your automation effort? And zooming out a little bit and having this broader understanding, and if you could align metrics and understanding of how different processes are working and what's the cost of it relative to value, et cetera, you could not only automate those things, but you could make sure you're automating the right things so that you could have impact for the business.
Mm-hmm. I think we're all living now in a world where everyone tries to leverage AI as much as possible by all managed buzzwords, but at the end it comes back to understand what data you have and understand how this data is interconnected in your organization.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there will be no automation possible, because what should it do? Like, there's no guidance or guardrails for the agents. Otherwise, they will run around creating hallucinations and awful things in your organization.
Yeah. It's a simple example, and I've seen this many times, where the business calls a process like, we're going to send wire payments, and maybe the technology says transfer funds. Well, you're going to have a lot of documentation that describes those things, the same process in detail, but in different ways. How's AI going to decipher what's what? If humans can't decipher it, and AI is obviously very intelligent, but I think it's going to struggle as well, and it's going to give you bad outcomes. So why not commit to creating that right semantic structure? And there's so many benefits. If you have it, it's not only just AI, but it's the people side of things too. Like, if I have this out here, and now my C-suite can look at the environment and say, where are we from a SWOT analysis? Where are we strong and weak? Where there are opportunities and threats, and really define where you put your project budget. You could change the change management process. So from defining project charters to creating requirements that are aligned to individual processes, to doing test scripts and organizational change management, better procedures, better training and job aids. Really everything from that perspective. Operational excellence, look at the organization holistically and find waste and inefficiencies. We already talked about IT architecture. And then risk and compliance. Coming from banking and financial services, which is a heavily regulated industry, they struggle with, where are my regulatory obligations? Am I meeting them? And I scan and you guys are in Europe, so there's a lot of regulations coming up, like DORA, Digital Operational Resiliency Act. And I think organizations are going to struggle unless they have this understanding of everything that their business does, where they use third-party vendors, and what's a critical business process that they have to keep running in the event of an adverse event, like a storm or you name it.
Is in your book, like, can you, like, because it all sounds like a huge, gigantic effort to inventory, but is there a way to start somewhere small and scale it to the enterprise level?
Yeah, I would start with one business unit or one organizational unit that has a problem. Use it, show people this transparency, use it in some of the ways that the business works, and then scale it from there. Obviously, you're going to need senior leaders and champions that support your efforts. So it's a good way to start and show, don't tell. I'll also say this, that it's actually not as much effort as you think, because I think it's very important to separate the name of the process versus the process model. And when I was at Citi, for instance, for about a year and a half, I had 4 people doing this, and we did about 60% of the business. And when I calculated it forward, I estimated there'd probably be about 10,000 processes we identified. But if you're just doing the process names, it's just a simple interview, and I could say, what is it you do? You tell me, I put the structure together. We have maybe 2 meetings to align to it, and then we're done. Later, you could come back and work with the business and say, where do you want more details of how this process is actually executed? And then take each of those processes that I identified and create a process model. So it's not as daunting as you think.
So little pieces, step by step, brick by brick, I would say.
Brick by brick. I would say this, though. it's good to start with a strategy of what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously aligned to what are the key strategic imperatives for the organization. Are they looking at cost? Are they looking at growth? Are they, whatever it is, because you want to develop a vision for what you're doing from a process capability in terms of what models are you creating, what data are you collecting, how do you intend to use it to add value to the organization, both short term and then have a longer term vision so that you're architecting this whole effort so that it could scale.
Interesting.
Okay. So thank you, Michael. I think it was really interesting, and it also aligns with our, I would say, vision that we have or we want to transfer. So it's nice to hear that we are on the same page, I would say. So thank you very much. Also, thank you, Tim. Thank you, David, that you were here.
Thank you, Inga.
Thanks for having me. This has been a great conversation.
No, I appreciate it.
Very insightful, very inspiring.
Yeah.
And we will see us on the next podcast, but don't forget to subscribe us on LinkedIn. And we also have the podcast on YouTube and, of course, Spotify. So we will see us on the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was